Hi, Jim.
Lifen.
Jim, we come now to the last episode of podcast Al Expert Season 2. I'd like to start this finale by thanking you for all the info, for all the research that you brought into our show, and for simplifying very complex concepts, to do with health, with sleep, nutrition, exercise, the way that you were explaining everything in terms of bullet points, your famous three. Really, thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Hopefully, the audience of all age groups found this as informative and entertaining as you did. It's been
Yeah,
a
we
pleasure.
really hope so. Thank you. In this episode, we'd like to end our season talking about the elderly. You say sometimes that aging is considered a health issue. And I think indeed it is. Aging, going to doctors, general checkup, it differs from one country to another. But here, let me talk about this from someone coming from the region, from the Arab region. We don't go to the doctor. I mean, we consider the doctor a monster. That's for one. Yeah, that's what we tell our kids. If you don't do this, I'm gonna take you to the doctor. So the doctor, as a concept, is a monster. For the elderly, obviously more so. The idea of general checkup is not there embedded yet in our culture. We go to the doctor when we can't get out of bed, when we're like severely ill. But the idea of maintaining good health, productive aging, I don't think we have it yet. Can you tell us more about that and what you recommend for the elderly?
Sure. Actually, this is probably a little misstep on my part. Um, Quality healthcare, right,
Mm,
is part of health essentials, really. We really appropriately should have brought it up there. You cannot have a productive, healthy life without proper health care. So,
mm,
what's this mean? Some of it's age appropriate. When you're a youngster, you're seeing a pediatrician, making sure you're fine when you're maturing and growing up. Once we hit maturity, women need two doctors, definitively. You need your general practitioner and your gynecologist.
right,
For men, usually you get by on the general doctor.
right.
And then that is fine, but it's critical that you meet those yearly or semi-annual checkups.
Mm,
Get your blood work done, right? Because what we want to do is those checkups aren't a bad thing.
mm,
What we're trying to do is just make sure that no condition is starting to occur so we can
right.
proactively deal with it before it becomes chronic.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's simple. Now we don't get diabetes. We don't run the risk of having a bad heart. It doesn't affect the quality of our vision and all that stuff because we got ahead of it. But then as we age, no matter how good we are at doing things are going to occur and we'll add doctors. So like I have some degenerative arthritic disorders.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously I had to add doctors to my retinue. That's
Right.
beyond the preview of my general practitioner. So now I see that doctor too. Why? Because I want to try to manage that condition as well as I can.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens as we get more and more doctors. Now it's key that two things are key. One is we do so.
Mm.
Often what happens is not only are they monsters, hey, that's everywhere, right? I have news for you. Even in the West,
Yeah.
a lot of people
Oh, not
are
just here.
not just
Okay.
here, it's everywhere. People, get ostrich syndrome. They want to stick their head in the sand and pretend nothing's happening.
Mm.
So, and I think also what happens frequently, I've talked to clients about this and they reiterate the same thing is people know when things aren't exactly right.
Yeah, we
Right?
do know.
Right?
We
But we
can't
don't want to go to
lie.
the doctor because it's sort of like, well, if I don't get told, it's not really wrong. Well, guess what? It is wrong.
It is very wrong.
So, be brave, suck it up, and go to the doctor and find out what's going wrong because then you can address it. Keeping your head in the sand is not going to help. So basically, what ends up happening is, I have this concept
Right.
of sort of preventative and responsive,
Mm-hmm.
uh, lifestyle management. If we're never seeing the doctor, we're never being proactive because we
Right.
don't know
We
where
don't
we're at.
know.
Right, exactly. So, having a doctor that you're comfortable with and that you can communicate with, which is another one. Doctors should not be these pronouncers of what you're going to do. It should be this back and forth about what works for you, what you're tolerable, what you're willing to do, and a communication that goes back and forth. It shouldn't be a one-way street. and then you establish the team of doctors that you find comfortable with.
Right.
And if you're not comfortable with your doctor, go get another one.
Yeah,
There's
change your
plenty of
doctor.
doctors out there, right?
I remember at some point,
Right?
you know, we were working together and I had this issue with my doctor, you know, and he'd been my doctor for so many
Right?
years. And the first thing that you said to me, the answer was very simple: change the doctor.
Yeah.
And I did.
Yeah.
But you know, it's also the culture, the mentality here. You know, it's kind of, you're loyal to one doctor, but if
Yeah.
he's not doing the job or she's not doing the job, just change them.
And often, particularly, so let's build a scenario.
Mm.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's say that you're feeling lethargic, you're drinking a lot of water, you're not sure what's going on. You go to the doctor and they pronounce that you're fine. They do some blood work and you're fine, but you just
But
know
you
you're
don't feel
not.
fine.
Go get a second opinion. See another doctor.
Right.
Go there. They actually run some blood work for you and you find out you were pre-diabetic or diabetic, right? So listen to yourself. And then particularly, though, so for instance, I just mentioned I had arthritis, and
Mm.
you know this. Like a
Yes,
year ago,
that's right.
my joint deteriorated my thumb to the point where it was dislocating,
Mm.
right? So I had no cartilage left in my thumb joint. So they ended up having to go in and fuse this lower joint together,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I didn't go to the first opinion. I did 3 different opinions and over 2 years before I waited till the pain got enough that it wasn't manageable anymore. I did all the other alternatives that I
Yeah.
can do before I went there. And I consulted 2 or 3 different doctors. I found the one that I was comfortable with, did the surgery. It was very successful. Took 6 months to rehab it,
Yeah,
right? So there
and look
was
at you
there was
now.
more teams
Mm-hmm.
involved here, right? So then first I had a doctor, then I had to rehab, so I had to find a good physiotherapist who I was comfortable with, that I felt was attentive to what needed to be done, and now I'm fully recovered. I mean, there's a few things that are limitations now, because my hand won't straighten fully,
Right.
but that I can
But
still
it's
lift, I can still
manageable.
work out, I can still
Yeah.
be physically active. Its actual impact on the quality of my life is minimal.
Right.
But
Right.
where if one, I hadn't done it, or two, I had not done my physical therapy properly,
Right.
this could have
Physical
been a
therapy.
chronic
This is
problem.
also very important. We
Yeah.
look at it here as like a supplementary activity
Yeah.
that we can do without.
Yeah.
Really, this is what I hear from so many people, and unfortunately so.
Yeah.
You know, I went to the doctor, he prescribed so, or I had to do this little procedure, and then I have 5 sessions of physiotherapy. Oh, I'm not gonna go to the physiotherapist, and also the proficiency of physiotherapists too. I mean, it plays a major role in that. It's same thing as doctors. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, we've spoken about this before. You know
Right.
my theory of physical therapy.
Mm.
If I could get doctors to recommend it, I would never not be in physical therapy,
Yeah.
right? There is always something in our body that is not optimally functioning. And to go to a professional that and this is not personal trainers, physiotherapists, their job is to learn how to rehabilitate muscles or joints that are not functioning optimally, and
Right.
give you prescriptive ways to make it function that's not surgical,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
So that's what we want. And then if you had a surgical procedure, and this is where everyone goofs up, say you go and have your knee surgery,
Right.
right? So you have knee surgery and you're told to go do rehab. If you do not go to rehab, you will have knee surgery again.
Yeah.
Or you'll get something else that'll go wrong, because since you can't walk properly, you'll lean too much on
The
this other
other
side,
one is
and now
gonna
your
get
other hip will go, or
tired.
something will go. So the whole idea of physical therapy is, one, because we've had a trauma,
Right.
to overcome that trauma and the trauma that happens to the muscles and ligaments and bones, whatever, depending upon the procedure you had,
Yeah.
to overcome that and get that back to as close to normal as possible. And then, even more importantly, it addresses the functional movement
Mm-hmm.
that we occur. Because what happens is, if you have a knee thing, you're going to be in a brace. You're going to atrophy. Your muscles are going to atrophy. You're going to change the way you move.
That's right.
And if we don't go to physical therapy, we'll never recover full natural movement. And what happens is you get a cascading effect of other ailments: lower back pain, hip pain, ankle pain, foot pain, right? And that's just from the knee. It applies to anything we do.
Right.
So rehab is essential. If you want to be happy
Yeah.
and healthy
Yeah.
and live a full life, do rehab.
Rehab, yeah,
Right.
because we look at also rehab as something that is, very exhausting. There's also this mentality of fast options, like fast food,
Yeah.
the same idea. So I just want a pill that makes me feel better, or a simple procedure, or even a surgery, not necessarily a simple one, and get it done with. I'm better after. So they look at the part of physical therapy, especially here we're talking about the elderly, as something that's very exhausting, painful even. So we want to tell them that it's okay to be comfortable,
Being
with,
uncomfortable.
yeah, that's after you.
Yes. Well, it's so there's two coins
Mm,
of lifestyle management, at least the way I view it. Right. One is preventative.
yeah,
And a lot of what we've been talking about over these last 6 podcasts
right,
has been preventative,
yeah,
right? So basically, what we're trying to do is ensure that we live the best life we can. Part of that is seeing the doctor, make sure what we're doing, make sure we're
right,
exercising proper, sleeping proper, managing our stress, like all of these things. Um, and then the other side of that coin is when the inevitable happens
hmm,
and we either get injured or experience a chronic illness, whatever the case may be, we're now entering into damage control, right? We're
responsive,
being responsive,
right,
right? We have an issue. We can't stick our head in the sand and pretend it's going to go away. It's just going to get worse, right? So now we have to be responsive. So now we adjust our lifestyle, and all these three levers that we've talked about before,
hmm,
our daily, I mean, our physical activity, our daily diet, and our the essentials that we have,
yeah,
we now we change those, we optimize those to address this issue that we have, so that we can get that issue back to as close to normal as possible. So now we can go back to preventative, right?
right,
So, and in the elderly, this is so important because you, we talked earlier about muscle wasting, and then we have osteoporosis, which we didn't mention, right?
so
All
many
of these are
diseases,
all
yeah,
preventable
mm,
if we do them, so we can prevent that from developing into a fall that now becomes a hip surgery that involves more rehab, and right. So this stuff tends to snowball in
right.
effect.
Right. So you speak about, how we can respond. I also believe there are so many things about health, like genetics, that we can't control.
Mhm.
And there are things that we can control if we visit the doctor, if we listen to our
Right.
bodies, if we, listen to ourselves, right? How can we ensure, in terms of the elderly, how can we ensure an action plan somehow to respond, yeah, to the big twos?
The big twos.
The big twos, yeah.
Okay,
How
so
can we age productively?
well, the big twos, for those that don't know,
Yeah,
usually are viewed as diabetes and coronary disease, right?
right.
They're actually, and this is actually interrelated into a thing that's called metabolic syndrome. It's
Okay.
actually tied
Metabolic
together.
syndrome.
Syndrome.
Okay.
Metabolic syndrome is a characterization of symptoms that um, end up displaying as diabetes and coronary effect and high blood hypertension.
Okay.
So basically, the symptoms are you have low cholesterol. You all heard good cholesterol, bad cholesterol.
Yeah.
We're not going to get into the weeds on that, but
Hmm.
generally speaking, in this, you have very low HDL, which is
Okay.
good. You have high LDL and triglycerides,
Right.
right?
Triglycerides.
You have
That's the killer.
elevated blood pressure,
Right.
right? Elevated general triglycerides are really bad, and you're just lethargic. So this combination, and your blood sugar gets elevated. So basically, what then this can display itself as diabetes.
Mm.
Now, diabetes is so bad, scary. Bad, I guess bad is a right word. It's because it increases your chance of coronary by 4 times,
Oh
400%.
my God.
Right? It's actually the leading cause of death for diabetics is coronary events.
Coronary events.
Right?
Wow.
So now here's the thing. One is very, remember we're talking about damage control?
Right.
Diabetes is very treatable.
It's
Type 2,
manageable.
type 2,
Type
not
2.
type
We're
1.
talking
So
about, yeah,
type
things
one's a
that
different
happen
animal
after. Yeah.
completely. So we're talking about type 2 diabetes.
Right.
Now, coronary is a different issue. So first recommendation, we go back to what we started with,
Mm-hmm.
your doctor, right?
Your,
So the first line of defense on both of these, you get blood work, you find out exactly what's happening. For the coronaries, it's a more complicated, coronary events are more complicated because there's many different types,
of
right?
course. Yeah.
We can have, AFib, which is your heart comes out of rhythm. We can have atherosclerosis, which is blockage of the heart. We can, over time, some people need to get pacemakers because their heart won't keep their rhythm
Yeah. So
anymore.
many
You can have
diseases of the
valve,
heart.
right? So there's a whole bunch that's,
Mm.
and I'm not a doctor, right? And none of us are qualified enough to do that.
Right.
So we need to get to a doctor and diagnose specifically what we have. Because that well, working in team with your cardiologist,
Right.
hopefully you're not at the point where you have to have a surgical intervention. We can do some kind of medical intervention. But then that's what, after that, then we adjust our diet, we adjust our physical
Lifestyle
thing,
coach.
right? We come in
Lifestyle
here,
changes.
well, it's using your lifestyle
Hmm.
as a almost a medicine for what's ailing you, right? We may not be able to get rid of all the, particularly if it's something genetic, like
Yeah.
you have a valve in your heart that's slowing, and or you have some stuff that maybe
We
something we have
can't
to deal with,
control, yeah,
but we
but
can limit then
mm,
that damage,
damage
right?
limitation.
Exactly. But like I said, first line, doctor, because we have to find out what's going on.
Yeah.
We have to get through the crisis. So if I'm having chest pain, we got to find out, is it just because my heart's an AFib? Is it, and then we get the proper medical intervention to get the crisis. We still have a coronary issue going on, but
Right.
we're through the crisis.
Right.
And then we work with our doctor, and then maybe a nutritionist, someone who handles physical, or a lifestyle person who specializes in that,
Right.
so that we start re-evaluating our lifestyle to mitigate that disorder. Now, with diabetes, it's a lot more straightforward.
Yeah.
Okay, because well, for instance, there was just it's not a new study. The study was put out 5 years ago. It was Direct, I believe it's the name of the study. Last year, they released their 5-year study. Not study, but reevaluation. So what they did is they put people, and this is even
Diabetics. Yeah.
diabetics,
Okay.
on a 12-week low calorie diet.
Okay.
Okay, and they were able to get, within 1 year, over 50% of the people had gone in complete remission from diabetes. What's remission mean?
Yeah.
Remission means that before they were taking insulin, or they were taking some medication
Medication.
to
Yeah.
lower their glucose
Hmm.
levels to acceptable proportions. So what they've just found, they just went back now 5 years later,
Right.
and 1/4 of those people are still in remission. Now, remember, this study, well, I find this so encouraging,
Yeah.
is you got to remember, this study, all they did was restrict calories with these
Mm.
people. They didn't do exercise. They really didn't do a lifestyle intervention. They just did a diet intervention, and still,
One of the health
yeah,
essentials.
and
Yeah.
they got 25% of the people to be in complete remission. What's
So we're really in control.
We are in control.
We
Our
can.
life, diabetes, not talking about type 1,
Yeah.
type 2,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
That's very
because it's
clear.
exact opposite of this, right?
Mm.
Is almost the vast majority of people suffering from type 2 diabetes. It's a lifestyle disease.
Right.
It's not I mean, it presents itself as a health disease, but it's a lifestyle disease. We can address this
Hmm.
once we get through the crisis. So if you find out you have type 2 you would definitively have to go to the doctor.
Yeah.
And now we have elevated glucose levels out of control. We must bring those down. But after we're through the crisis
What do you
again,
do with your life, like
we can
everyday
we can
life?
put that into remission. We can
Mm.
go off those medicines, and the medicines are terrible. Why? I mean, let me put
Terrible.
the
Terrible.
terrible.
Let's rephrase that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's terrible effect overall on your life. So, I mean, it's wonderful that you're not dying,
Right.
like
That's
dying in the short
yeah.
term,
Life
but in the
saving.
long term,
Hmm.
what happens when we're when we're insulin dependent now,
Hmm.
particularly injection insulin dependent, what ends up happening is, now we've gotten a little better with modern devices, but still it happens. What happens is, because your body can't accurately control your glucose levels, right?
Right.
We're relying on externally shot insulin to do so.
Hmm.
But what ends up happening is we still get these peaks in glucose levels
Yeah.
before we can get the shot in. So basically what ends up happening is we get a much more variability
Right.
in our glucose levels,
Hmm.
and that causes
Other things too in the
huge
body.
things.
Yeah.
Like I had a great uncle of mine that had both legs and one arm amputated
Oh my God.
from diabetes, because it affects your blood flow to your limbs. He also went partially blind, which is actually, most diabetics have eyesight issues over the
Right.
long term.
Kidneys.
And like I
Kidney
said,
failure.
and the
Yeah.
number one killer,
Yeah.
coronary disease.
Coronary disease.
It
Yeah.
ends up becoming coronary disease. So you have this litany of just really bad health outcomes if you remain. You're always going to be diabetic.
Yeah.
But if you remain actively diabetic,
Right.
but if we can put it into remission, those go away.
We can get out of
When
it.
we're in
Yeah.
remission, we do no longer need medication to control our glucose levels. you're no longer going to have to worry about your vision and all that stuff because your body is now functioning healthily.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's which do you want,
Yeah.
right? And
It's a choice after all.
it
It's
is
a
a
choice
choice.
that
Now,
we have to make.
in
Yeah.
all fairness, my diabetes runs in my family. That's part of the reason I'm pre-diabetic. I mean, part of the reason. Like, so you can be susceptible. Some that doesn't mean it's
Yeah, these are the
inevitable,
things that we can control
right?
with
So I
what
have a
we said.
genetic
Hmm.
predisposition for diabetes. Doesn't mean I am, fated to have diabetes in my life.
Yeah.
But in my family, 4 generations back has had diabetes. My great grandmother died at 38 from diabetes. My grandmother died from diabetes. My dad didn't die from diabetes, but he had diabetes for a long time in his life.
But
But
you're
back,
aware of all of that. You
right.
see, like you're aware of the family history,
But
which is also very important, and like the general checkup, point we talked about.
exactly. And we're becoming more aware. Like even back in the 1970s, my grandmother would sit down and have like a piece of white toast with jelly on it.
Yeah,
And she thought that was
that was
good,
the same movies
right?
too.
And they were like, oh, my doctor, told me, this is a little bit, it's not bad.
A little
Now,
bit is not bad.
This is Jim Hamill uh, uh, view of this. Okay,
Okay.
so this isn't medical advice, but I would advise anybody that's diabetic, pre-diabetic, to eliminate as many carbs from their diet as possible,
Yeah.
at least until they go into remission. Right. So remember, we talked about you can vary your diet
Right.
based or and your lifestyle based on where you are at the time in your life. We know that diabetes is a glucose control disease.
So we can control it.
So we can
Where do
control
we
it.
get
Right.
glucose from outside?
Yeah, exactly. So critically important. And if we do that, right, now we're living a healthier life. And diabetes is as you can tell,
Yeah,
is one
yeah.
that really strikes home because it's a precursor for so many other debilitating disorders, right?
Absolutely.
So we it stops your healing factor,
Right.
right? Not stops it, but it slows down. So if you
Slows
get cut,
down.
you don't heal as effectively. That also applies to if you walk or run, your joints, it takes longer to recover, right? Because we just talked about physical activity equals we're healthfully stressing the body,
Absolutely.
and if we can't recover from it, so really it's something we want to get under control.
Oh, Jim, like, thank you so much for all this info and for, shedding the light on the importance of general checkup, and how you're approaching health in general, incorporating the medical with lifestyle, it sounds more like, how you can manage a crisis. So life here is not
Right.
crisis per se, but it's something that we need to manage and we need to be conscious of, mindful of the decisions, and aware of all these stages that we go into, and how to adapt. You wanted to end this episode, this finale, with kiss.
Yes.
We're kissing the audience.
Yes.
Okay, tell us about that.
It's an acronym for
For what?
keep it simple, stupid.
Okay.
Stupid doesn't mean you guys are stupid. What it means is we covered a lot of different detail, a lot of it gets confusing. And actually I find in the health industry, and personally I think that's done purposefully
Yeah.
to make it confusing so that we buy things and go to things. Keep it simple, stupid means it's really the basics of it are easy. Eat well, exercise, get a good night's sleep, and reduce stress in your life. You
Right.
do those 4 things consistently. When things feel like they're out of control, sit back and do KISS. Eat well, get a little exercise, manage your sleep, manage your stress. You will live a much better life just doing those. And then once you're doing that, you'll feel control of your life. You'll be willing to do all the rest of the stuff.
Yeah, this is wonderful. This
Right?
is wonderful. I hope that with all this info and this approach, we're able to help this, our viewers to keep it really simple. Thank you so much, Jim. Much appreciated. And I hope we continue our talk in another season of Podcast Al Expert.
I
Thank
hope we
you.
do. Thank you so much.